Bob's big arms were closed around to hold me inside, and I was squeezed in the dark between Bob's new sweating tits that hang enormous, the way we think of gods as big. Going around the church basement full of men each night we met. This is Art, this is Paul, this is Bob. Bob's big shoulders made me think of the horizon. Bob's thick blonde hair was what you get when hair cream calls itself sculpting mousse, so thick and blonde, and the part is so straight. His arms wrapped around me, Bob's hand palms my head against the new tits sprouted on his barrel chest. It will be all right, Bob says. You cry now. From my knees to my forehead, I feel chemical reactions within Bob burning food and oxygen. Maybe they got it all early enough, Bob says. Maybe it's just seminoma. With seminoma, you have almost 100% survival rate. Bob's shoulders inhale themselves up in a long draw, then drop, 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 in jerking sobs. Draw themselves up, drop, drop, drop. I've been coming here every week for 2 years, and every week Bob wraps his arms around me, and I cry. You cry, Bob says, and inhales and sobs. Go on now, and cry. So a little excerpt there from the opening of chapter 2 of Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club from 1996. This was originally published, and many people will know of the film adaptation directed by David Fincher from 1999. Almost more so people will perhaps know of Fight Club from the film and the infamous the first rule of Fight Club quote. This has sort of been I saw the film when I was 15 or so, and probably at the time thought it was really cool. Didn't read the book basically until now. It's not necessarily something that was a priority, but it's something that I've had on my shelf, something I picked up for about £1 at some point, and thought maybe I'll read it and see how it translates as a novel, as a book. And this is going to be one of those videos where I'm basically almost solely negative about this. In fact, in terms of its form, in terms of what it represents, I find it fairly disgusting, and not, I don't mean that in its content. I'm not acting prudish in relation to the fact that Palahniuk consistently uses words like piss and tits and vomit, and there's all these rather crass and blunt, very easy references to sex and violence and dystopia and revolution light all thrown in there, and punching and fighting. I don't mean disgusted in that sense. I mean disgusted at a certain abuse of various forms that believes they're going beyond those forms, but is actually completely within those forms. So much so that I would describe this book in a single word, which is cringe. It is a cringe-worthy book. But I will go through. I'll go through the plot first, and then there is about 2 or 3 key actual philosophical things that I want to bring in, because in a sense, as much as I dislike the book, it is almost the bastion, the clear example of a certain sense of cynical reason, which I consider one of the most damaging things that can sort of infect one's brain and lead them on a singular path that thinks it's multiple, almost to the end of their days, as in makes them believe they're beyond things. But we'll get to that. So for those that don't know, there is an unnamed narrator who's suffering from insomnia due to his stressful job as a product recall specialist. And he eventually, very quickly in the book, finds relief by attending support groups for conditions, usually sort of terminal conditions such as cancers, etc., for conditions that he obviously doesn't have. His sort of peace, because he's finding catharsis within these support groups, his peace is disrupted when he meets a character called Mala Singer, who is another tourist like him for these groups, who's also finding that this catharsis is something sort of wholly original and a feeling that they can't find anywhere else in this so dead, mundane, empty world. And their mutual awareness of each other's deception basically prevents the emotional release. They're noticing each other as fakes, which prevents the catharsis for either of them because they're sort of caught in their own illusion. They eventually kind of work out a scheme or an arrangement where they can attend different meetings, basically masturbatorily getting off from these meetings of illnesses and conditions they don't have, to sort of bleed them dry for a qualitative feeling that they're not finding in the world. Then the narrator, who is a rather at the early point of the book, is kind of like a Bret Easton Ellis character. Actually, he's very he's a consumerist. He's very in line with the trends of the day. He's always on about his IKEA furniture. There's a very 90s feel to the things that are mentioned, of course. But then his condominium explodes. There is a house fire that burns away all his material possessions, and he ends up moving in with Tyler Durden, who is a sort of charismatic extremist that at this point he meets on a nude beach. Eventually, slow goings on with them, and then Tyler asks the narrator to hit him, initiating a fight that they both enjoy, that is a little bit slapstick when they first start, and then eventually they establish, as per the title of the novel, a fight club where only men engage in bare knuckle fighting matches according to strict rules. The first two being no one talks about Fight Club, and the second rule, no one talks about Fight Club, oft repeated by teenagers. Tyler eventually rescues Marla Singer, who's the tourist in these groups, from a suicide attempt, and begins an affair with her that confuses the narrator. Fight Club begins to expand. It transforms into something called Project Mayhem, which is a militant anti-consumerist organization dedicated to bringing down modern civilization. And one of the differences between the film is that the film has a greater emphasis on the anti-consumerist elements, and the book has a sort of the Project Mayhem has another value with a realignment with Mother Nature. But ultimately, I don't think the difference matters all that much. It's still ridiculous and teenage and cringe. The members of this sort of project follow rules centered on sort of obedience to Tyler, who becomes this we could say a modern secular anti-guru of this urban, gritty, you don't know just how shallow everything is world. And then the narrator eventually becomes uncomfortable with the destructive activities of Project Mayhem, and especially after a friend from his support group dies during one of the operations, he resolves to stop Tyler. But in the big revelation, spoiler alert if people haven't seen the film or read the book, Marla helps the narrator discover that he and Tyler are the same person, that Tyler is the alternate personality that has emerged during the narrator's mental breakdown, possibly after the condominium explosion, where he's kind of stripped of all that materiality that is his anchor in the modern world. The narrator learning that Tyler destroyed his own apartment to create Fight Club. Tyler eventually, this split personality from this point on, plans to martyr himself by blowing up a national museum, taking, of course, the narrator with him. And then the narrator confronts Tyler on the building's roof, and Marla arrives. Tyler disappears, existing only in the narrator's mind. The bomb fails because Tyler mixed paraffin into the explosives. And in desperation, which is actually where the book kind of half starts, the narrator shoots himself in the mouth to eliminate Tyler. He survives, awakens in a mental hospital, and is approached by employees who are members of Project Mayhem. And then they inform him that the plan continues and they expect Tyler's return. Okay, the themes are pretty on the surface. It's to do with what your identity is in the modern world. It's maybe to do with masculinity, if people really want to draw that in, but I would actually change the idea that it's to do with masculinity to really be to say that, because masculinity is to do, well, if we say modern masculinity, masculine is in relation to the masculine and the feminine, and so I would actually say that this has a greater relation to broness and being a fucking dude, which is ridiculous all throughout. Obviously, consumerism is there. The notion of being somewhat psychologically fragmented in the modern world amidst all this, oh my God, consumerism's so bad. That's also there. The emptiness of it all, the emptiness of the modern world. Oh my. The crisis of people's identities, all these great themes, which, you know what, in defense, right? Like the one defensible thing I could say is that, when I was 15, I first watched the film. It was really cool, and it felt transgressive when I was 15 because one could say that your maturation is only at such a point where these things, these ideas seem novel, seem original, seem unique, and they seem to be of real importance, as if answers to these questions with regards to one's relationship with consumerism, one's relationship with the modern world, one's identity in the modern world, if they are answered within the transgressive bounds that Palahniuk sets out, then some amount of catharsis will happen, something will somehow happen. Of course, when you're 15 and when you're a teenager and you know the world and you know everything, this is of course true, but this isn't a young adult fiction book as far as I can tell, but it certainly feels like one. Maybe it is. I don't even really know. I don't think it is, though. But the point being is that, well, to what extent do any of these themes hold a candle to anything, to really hold any serious light on the discussion of modern alienation at all? They don't, for me. And the book sets itself up as a novel that is a tour de force, both in style, in language, a very minimal, stripped back style that is crass and, kind of biting and fierce and doesn't pull any punches. You're gonna hear about dildos and piss and shit. Like, it doesn't, so it sets itself up both stylistically, in content, in plot, and in character to be this transgression against the modern world, but all the while remaining within the bounds of the modern world and actually never finding a viable even discussion on actually what is a viable exit. And you could say, well, what about Project Mayhem? I will get to the main point of my annoyance and critique of this novel. But I will, when I said that the book can really be described as cringe, I just want to go to, this is from page 63, which is the start of chapter 8. So really got going now. Fight Club is well underway, and in that sense, the narrator has begun his sort of full, this inversion that Palahniuk is doing, where he mentions earlier in the novel that the narrator becomes resurrected after a loss of all of his material stuff. So we can say, like, after the resurrection, this is the new Fight Club man. Beginning of chapter 8, page 63. My boss sends me home because of all the dried blood on my pants, and I am overjoyed. The hole punched through my cheek doesn't ever heal. I'm going to work, and my punched-out eye sockets are two swollen-up black bagels around the little piss holes I have left to see through. Until today, it really pissed me off that I've become this totally centered Zen master and nobody had noticed. Still, I'm doing the little fax thing. I write little haiku things and fax them around to everyone. When I pass people in the hall at work, I get totally Zen right in everyone's hostile little face. Worker bees can leave, even drones can fly away. The queen is their slave. You give up all your worldly possessions and your car and go live in a rented house in the toxic waste part of town where late at night you can hear Marla and Tyler in his room calling each other human butt wipe. Take it, human butt wipe. Do it, butt wipe. Choke it down. Keep it down, baby. Just by contrast, that makes me the calm little center of the world. Me with my punch-out eyes and dried blood and big black crusty stains on my pants. I'm saying hello to everybody at work. Hello, look at me. Hello, I am so zen. This is blood. This is nothing. Hello, everything is nothing, and it's so cool to be enlightened like me. Now, maybe that's a play on itself. I don't think it's smart enough to be. Basically, a lot of the language after a certain point is very close to that, and is exhausting, is tiring for the wrong reasons, and it's almost not minimal enough. So, and it isn't stylized enough either. I mean, if we think of someone like J.G. Ballard, whose focus is architecture and modern man's relationship with the urban, and the style, the sort of explosive hyperlibidinal style of that, and the deranged alienation is actually found within the style. Maybe someone else, trying to think of another equivalent, maybe even Bret Easton Ellis, when in American Psycho, these long lists of consumer products that become a sort of, this might sound ridiculous, but an immanent transcendent, some or a transcendent form of style. So some element of the world, of the consumerist world, that someone like Bret Easton Ellis is tackling. I'm not a big Bret Easton Ellis fan. Is tackling in American Psycho, when he begins to have these long lists of consumer products that Patrick Bateman identifies as his, utilizes and subsumes almost into himself as his identity. These long lists become, in your reading of them, something that breaks out in its absurdity, in its style, from the very world as a form of critique. And yet with Fight Club, there just isn't any elements like this. Everything is contained within the bounds of that world. And so we're just left within it. And so you don't know whether or not how to read that. And so for me, anything that, because of the very content and the very point, it seems, of this modern critical exegesis of the modern world, of everything, of all these little, oh my God, isn't this so empty and shallow, is that anything that was then to be read beneath surface level would be a betrayal of the book itself, because it would be a betrayal of the very emptiness that it seeks to purport is in everything. And so Fight Club itself is an artifact of the very world that it seeks to critique, and it's just immediately defeating itself because of that. But that's one critique of it. So the first one, so the main one is actually my main criticism is to do with cynical reason, which I'll get to. But my other critique is actually to do with nihilism. And so when we go to a little excerpt from page 31, very short one. I melt and swell at the moment of landing, when one wheel thuds on the runway, but the plane leans to one side and hangs in the decision to right itself or roll. For this moment, nothing matters. Look up into the stars and you're gone. Not your luggage. Nothing matters. Not your bad breath. The windows are dark outside and the turbine engines roar backward. The cabin hangs at the wrong angle under the roar of the turbines, and you'll never have to file another expense account claim. Receipt required for items over $25. You will never have to get another haircut. Now, there's very much a meme about this online, right? The meme around the unnamed narrator's complaints about basically being a middle manager. Now, one, oh no, this guy has to fly around all the modern world in this comfortable jet and do an insurance job. Am I meant to take this seriously? Am I meant to feel sorry for this chump? And so nothing matters. You're gonna have to get another receipt. Like, dude, your life's too comfortable. Your life is too comfortable, and there's nothing to complain about here. And you end up listening to basically a whinge bag. Now, the thing is that this ultimately unfolds, as so many modern discussions do. We could argue that someone like, largely bringing this in because I'm reading it at the moment, but Keiji Nishitani would say that the fundamental issue of the Western world, of the modern Western world, is nihilism. And so really, nihilism is the discussion that almost everything is around. And so, but this is a book that wears nihilism on its sleeve, that wears the meaningless and pointlessness and emptiness on its sleeve, because not only is it saying that the modern world, our 9-to-5 jobs without commuting, and the fact we all love consumer products, and the fact that all our identities are based around consumer products and empty consumption and boring jobs and wage slave jobs, or however you want to put it, that in itself is a nihilistic way to live, because we all know it's meaningless. So equally we are engaged in a form of nihilism. So there's a reciprocal relationship between the world and the cultural form of nihilism, that they both are sort of one and the same. It's an Ouroboros where you can't see which one started the other. It's a nihilistic cyclic recursion. Now, when we turn to someone like Friedrich Nietzsche, who has this the two differing modes of nihilism, active nihilism and passive nihilism. Very, very loosely, with the definitions being, is that active nihilism involves a critical questioning of the existing values and a conscious effort to create new values. So the transvaluation of all values, and then the creation of new values from that position of critical questioning. Whether the nihilism, this in this sense, it would be that the felt nihilism of this nothing matters would destroy and all the values and everything you lived for. All the objective value of the universe, and following this, the active nihilism would be to create your own values from that, right? And from that, the active nihilist has a relief in the world because of this possible creation of values from active nihilism. Whereas on the inverse, if you want to put it that way, passive nihilism is really the exact opposite here, is the sense that because there is, once again, this meaningless, empty world, and with no meaning and therefore no point to live, we would just accept our fate. We would not lay down and die, we would lay down and live. The passive nihilist is lost and helpless and indifferent to everything, right? Now, the very easy argument, and I'm going to almost like do a Zizek, and I think Zizek really likes this book, but I don't know, but I'm going to do actually it's the inverse. The argument would be that this is in content and plot, that this is an active nihilist book, because what the unnamed narrator in his split, you could argue that the unnamed narrator, when he's in his former job, is the passive nihilist, right? I think this would be the easy nihilistic reading, would be that the unnamed narrator in his job, in his consumerist position, is actually the passive nihilist. He's clearly recognized that the world is meaningless and pointless, but he's laid down and he's just sort of going through the motions. And then in his split, in Tyler Durden as his other personality, the other part of his personality, Tyler Durden, is actually the active nihilist, because from that self-same person has developed an alternative personality, or however you want to put it, or just an alternative character that is a representative of the active nihilism and begins to create new values. I say that's complete horse shit, because the supposed active nihilism of this book is a duality that is completely contained within the very emptiness that it seeks to critique. So the entirety of Project Mayhem, the entirety of Tyler Durden's supposed transgressions, his entire persona, is itself reliant on the very world that it seeks to critique. And in that sense, it is just the exact same form, in the same way that the majority of punk rock music is just very much needed by the establishment as its counterforce, which thereby legitimizes it. Tyler Durden is the worst because he legitimizes the thing he seeks to critique even more so. It is a duality that is feeding on itself all the time. The true active nihilist position would be to disengage in a form of non-attachment. That would be the true active nihilist position, but that's not happening here. And so I say that all of them are passive nihilists, because they have not escaped a certain duality of forms that are all contained within the modern world. Now that is critique one of this cringe. The next one is to do, and it's the more important one for me, especially with this book, as a thing that is out in the world and can be picked up almost like a manual of identity for so many people. And it's to do with consumerism, but it's also to do with something called cynical reason, which I'll get to. But a little excerpt on this. This is to do with 2 pages to do with the narrator's condominium being burnt down. The Mamala quilt cover set, designed by Thomas Harilla and available in the following: orchid, fuchsia, cobalt, ebony, jet, eggshell or heather. It took my whole life to buy this stuff. The easy care textured lacquer of my calyx occasional tables, my steg nesting tables. You buy furniture. You tell yourself, this is the last sofa I will ever need in my life. Buy the sofa, then for a couple of years, You're satisfied that no matter what goes wrong, at least you've got your sofa issue handled. Then the right set of dishes, then the perfect bed, the drapes, the rug. Then you're trapped in your lovely nest, and the things you used to own, now they own you. Until I got home from the airport, the doorman steps out of the shadows to say there's been an accident. The police, they were here and asked a lot of questions. The police think maybe it was the gas. Maybe the pilot light on the stove went out, or a burner was left on, leaking gas, and the gas rose to the ceiling, and the gas filled the condo from ceiling to floor in every room. The condo was 1,700 square feet, with high ceilings, and for days and days the gas must have leaked until every room was full. When the rooms were filled to the floor, the compressor at the base of the refrigerator clicked on. Detonation. The floor-to-ceiling windows in their aluminium frames went out, and the sofas and the lamps and dishes and sheet sets in flames, and the high school annuals and the diplomas and telephone, everything blasting out from the 15th floor in a sort of solar flare. Oh, not my refrigerator. I'd collected shelves full of different mustards, some stone ground, some English pub style. There were 14 different flavors of fat-free salad dressing and 7 kinds of capers. I know. House full of condiments and no real food. The doorman blew his nose and something went into his handkerchief and the good slap of a pitch into a catcher's mitt. You could go up the 15th floor, the doorman said, but nobody could go into the unit. Police orders. The police had been asking, did I have an old girlfriend who'd want to do this, or did I make an enemy, or somebody who had access to dynamite? It wasn't worth going up, the doorman said. All that's left is the concrete shell. The police hadn't ruled out arson. No one had smelled gas. The doorman raises an eyebrow. The guy spent his time flirting with the day maids and nurses who worked in the big units of the top floor and waited in the lobby chairs for their rides after work. 3 years I lived here, and the doorman still sat reading his Ellery Queen magazine every night while I shifted packages and bags to unlock the front door and let myself in. The doorman raises an eyebrow and says how some people would go on a long trip and leave a candle, a long, long candle burning in a big puddle of gasoline. People with financial difficulties do this stuff. People who want out from under. I asked to use the lobby phone. A lot of young people try to impress the world and buy too many things, the doorman said. I called Tyler. So here we see this sort of moment of I don't know what Palahniuk really, if there's any metaphor too much, but this fire consuming everything that was upholding that modern identity, which turns out to be largely material and very much a Patrick Bateman-esque reeling off less so the actual items in this case, but his relationship with them and the fact of his knowing. Okay. And so this for me is the most important thing, and the reason this book is so foul for me is this is an absolutely transparent moment of what is known as cynical reason. And it's not what it is and isn't within the books. And what we actually see there in that excerpt is that the unnamed narrator, and Palahniuk is doing this is the book, really. The unnamed narrator, in addressing with that cynical, satirical edge, right? All condiments, no real food, not my refrigerator. He knows, okay, so he knows how ridiculous this framing of identity via material possessions is. There is a consistent acknowledgement, a cynical acknowledgement throughout the book of not only a self-knowing from Palahniuk about how ridiculous our modern empty world is. There is a self-knowing from the characters themselves. So in the unnamed narrator's engagement with the groups that he goes to, with Project Mayhem, with the constant jabs at consumerism, there is not only a knowing of the emptiness of that lifestyle, but there is a knowing of that lifestyle. There is a knowing of the knowingness, right? Sounds very pretentious, but this is the definition of cynical reason. And I use a few Zizek quotes on this. These are near all from his very short essay, Cynicism as a Form of Ideology, which is a very important essay. Zizek defines cynical reason as the feeling that we know very well that our present situation is invidious, but all the same we act as though it isn't. Cynical reason is no longer naive, but it is a paradox of an enlightened false consciousness. One knows the falsehood very well. One is well aware of a particular interest hidden behind an ideological universality, but still one does not renounce it. And then, this is probably the more important one, We must distinguish this cynical position strictly from what Sloterdijk calls cynicism with a K. Cynicism represents the popular plebeian rejection of the official culture by means of irony and sarcasm. The classical cynical procedure is to confront the pathetic phrases of the ruling official ideology, its solemn grave tonality, with everyday banality and to hold them up to ridicule, thus exposing behind the sublime noblesse of the ideological phrases the egotistical interests, the violence, the brutal claims to power. What we're finding with the engagement with cynical reason, in short, is the belief that because you know that you are above it. Because you know how, look how ridiculous, look how empty, like, me identifying with all these consumer products is. Look how empty this fucking book is. It is empty, but that doesn't mean you're above it, and that doesn't mean you've worked anything out. It's completely tyrannical because it's interjecting not a question. It is not interjecting a question. It's interjecting an answer where there really wasn't a question to begin with. So it's interjecting that this has some sort of answer about the supposed emptiness of the modern world. It's not difficult. It's not difficult to comment about how empty the modern world or consumerism is. That is low grade, infantile, less than undergraduate beginnings of any critical thinking, is to say that, sitting around going to a 9 to 5 and not really engaging with existence is, to many people, clearly a fairly empty, shallow existence. Of course, that usually comes from a position of elitism, and what people usually mean is that people who aren't interested in the things I'm interested in are shallow and theirs is empty. But of course, me buying philosophy books or me buying all smart person stuff, that's not shallow. They never really turn that back on themselves, even though that is exactly another form of consumerism. But the point is that with cynical reason, again, this idea that because we know we are above, and so this book, in every single facet of how this book is written, is very much attending to the idea that because it's in its minutiae, it's like, look, piss and vomit and, yeah, man, consumer goods, they're so empty. Constant, ceaseless addresses of how empty and shallow everything is. But within that self-same proclamation of that emptiness is the self-belief that because it knows it, it's above it. But it isn't above it. It isn't above it at all. None of them above it. Tyler Durden and the whole thing is caught in a duality that is just a reaction against the thing it is, which begets the thing that it hates. And so it's a cynical reason that is just what this is always what cynical reason does as well. I mean, you can take a very clear example of this from the modern world that so many people engage in, where they will quite literally say that they're rotting, right? Then, and not like flesh, but what they'll do is they'll, what you're going to do your evening. I'm going to sit on the sofa. I'm going to rot, right? I'm going to slob out. And they'll knowingly use those phrases, and that's cynical reason, in a very minor form, because we could say that being cynical is in the case of the original cynic Diogenes is to turn society's values and make them face them themselves, and to say, look how shallow this is, and actually have this kind of friction. The logic of cynical reason is one that you now know that society's values, you know that society's values are supposedly, according to your cynicism, are empty, and as per Sloterdijk, you respond with irony and sarcasm, and so you're now apparently ironically slobbing out on the couch knowingly, via that logic of cynical reason. Fight Club is a book of potent, banal irony that is doing the exact same thing in the novelistic form, and it's dangerous for that fact that you read it, or young people might read it, and I don't think the danger is that they're going to try to copy Tyler Durden. I think most people are sensible enough to realize that it's not what Palahniuk is trying to say. I don't know what the hell he's trying to say. The danger is that this is enough, very much like the meetings that the unnamed narrator goes to cause a catharsis of cynical reason that makes you go, yeah, I know all about the modern world, all right, and then still continue to enter into it within that dualistic frame, and not ever get beyond it. And that's the most dangerous thing about it, is that cynical reason can just continue and continue and continue. Because once you have that position of being above, of the knowing position, you could say, of I can justifiably and legitimately engage within the empty, shallow, hollow consumerism of the world. I can knowingly do that without the let's say negative or even amoral or even immoral effects that I supposedly believe are there, because I know, because I'm above it and I know. And so what is the difference between engaging in consumerism and just engaging in it, and what is the difference in earnestly engaging with it, and what's the difference in cynical reason engaging in it? Nothing, except that the cynical reason is just a bunch of assholes who think they're better than everyone. And so what this book will do is basically form in one a position that makes them think that they're above that world that they're critiquing, but actually there is no attending to any possibility of an answer, no attending to even the questions that are being asked, no attending maybe even in a Foucauldian sense of saying, well, why is this shallow? Why is it hollow? Or a very, very basic question regarding this book and its plot specifically, why is it so bad to have a boring insurance job? That's what you've got to complain about? Get a grip. So, yeah. And then just this one quote from the book that I just think is absolutely pitiful and pointless. This is a legit quote from it. It's only after you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. But they haven't lost everything. They didn't lose everything. Because the very materiality. So if we go back to the plot, he loses his condominium. And then he says, oh, you rent a place in the toxic part of town. You're still within the exact same form that you're critiquing. You haven't lost everything because you're still abiding by the exact same ideological structures that you were within. You're not free to do anything because you haven't even understood what freedom is. It's the equivalent of a school kid, like, just getting in detention and thinking they've won. You know, I won at school because I was in detention every lunchtime or something. You know, I'm beating the system by like annoying it. Ridiculous. And what will result is a boring form of cynical reason apathy, where you then tell yourself you are justified in doing nothing. You are justified in no longer thinking about the issue, no longer delving into the issue, because you believe yourself to be above it. This cynical reason is the most dangerous thing that can happen to a mind. Absolutely. And what duality we set up with after that, when we're talking about Fight Club, the actual Fight Club, the punching. What we're given here, this as a reader, we're given one duality. You can either boring job and shirt and tie and consumerist products, or get punched in the face. That's your imaginative extent, is either just getting punched in the face or going to work in a middle management job. That is the exact same duality that I'm on about. They're exactly the same. They're exactly the same. And so that's my thoughts on the book anyway. That's pretty much my critique of it. I mean, if you wanted to read it, I think it's like, as a read, right? Do I think it's bad? No. Actually don't. Like, it's badly written? No. Like, it's not actually clunky. But like, you could read through it, and maybe if someone else got some other ideas, I'd like to hear them. But it's very popular. Lots of reviews, so I thought, well, sit on my shelf, I'll see. But I didn't think much of it. There's nothing there. And there can't be anything there. It will betray itself if there is anything there. But I mean, if you're super interested, watch the film, because at least the film's well shot. I think it works after now reading the novel. It works better as a film, I think. But I mean, read if you're gonna read it, you're gonna read it. But I don't. The most it can give you is a tick in a box to no longer continue an investigation, in any serious sense, to think that you're above it, and that's unhealthy. It's not good. Anyway, that's my review and thoughts of Chuck Palahniuk's 1996 novel, Fight Club. Thank you all for listening.